Well, good evening, good evening, good evening to all of you. And again, let me say Happy New Year to those of you who missed me last week and the week before. Let me say Happy New Year to you. And I trust that this year is going to be quite an exciting year for you, a year that is going to be filled with lots of success for you. And so we're on tonight with Advancing the Cause, another episode of Advancing the Cause. And I'm hoping that you, like everyone else, will share the link and you're going to say to your friends and your family and everybody else, share the link because Advancing the Cause is on. Tonight, we're going to be dealing again with education is in crisis. And of course, not education alone, the entire country is in crisis, if you ask me. And we're going to share with you quite a lot tonight. So tonight is going to be exciting. But before we go further into what we have to do, of course, I must send out those birthday greetings to all those persons who celebrated birthdays last week, birthdays up to today. We have an 82-year-old. I think it's 82 years old. Let me get it right. Oh, Miss Hazelyn Sampson, 80 years old. And we have Paula Hines, 75 years old. And we have Jamal Hinks. He celebrated his 25th birthday. And so many others. I just don't want to continue to call names because I'm going to get myself into trouble. But look, happy birthday to all of you who would have celebrated your birthdays. And I trust that God is going to bless you richly as you move over into this next chapter. And of course, you know, when we're excited and we're celebrating birthdays, we have the other side, which is not very nice. The side where we send out condolences to all those who would have lost their loved ones. It's not easy to lose a loved one. And so we, on this side of the sphere, we take this opportunity to extend condolences to you, and we trust that God is going to grant you comfort even at this time. And of course, let me single out a couple of persons that I have very, very close links with. The Parks family, they've lost their brother, and to you we pray that God will grant you comfort. We have Shondell DQ Phillips, just retired as head teacher. She lost her father. They were pretty close, and I know this is tearing her apart. But Shondell, just know that you have a friend in God, and you have lots of arms to comfort you even at this time. We have Sister Carol Wright, who lost her daughter-in-law just recently, and to you too, our condolences. We have the Eastman's family who just lost their 26-year-old sister, cousin, aunt, daughter. This is the young lady who jumped to her death. This is a tragic one. Of course, we're going to touch a little bit on that one. And then we have the Jackman's family. They have lost, and the teachers have lost another colleague, the deputy head teacher of Richard Ishmael Secondary School, Benita Jackman. This is such a shock to us. And again, this is another teacher who has died and was unable to access her benefits, all because of this wicked, incompetent and corrupt government, the PPP. This teacher could not access her 8% salary increase. She could not get her allowances for additional qualification. She could not even get access to her duty-free concession, again, because of this corrupt government. And so teachers are dying, teachers are retiring, teachers are migrating, they're resigning and can't have access to their benefits. But it's all in the game of being wicked and vindictive. And so as we go on, we want to extend condolences to these persons, and we pray that God is going to grant you the comfort you need. Look, we can't waste any more time. We're going to go right into this program. This evening, I have with me a very fine young man. I don't want to say gentleman at this time, a very fine young man. If you see him, you're going to agree with me. He's going to be sharing the stage with me this evening. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself before we get deep into what we're talking about. His name is Mr. Gerald Pereira. He is a former educator, well, once an educator, always an educator. And he is also an activist. He is going to tell you a little bit more about himself, and then we'll talk about education in crisis. Over to you, my guest. Welcome to Advancing the Cause.
Thank you very much, Comrade Coretta, for having me here. I'm flattered when you say a young man. I'm now 71.
Wow.
Well, you know, there's a saying, black don't crack.
That's true. And you know what? They say life begins at 40. Yeah. So you're just about, 31 years old?
Well,
and that's why I said you were a fine young man.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I I was always purpose driven and ideologically driven. I always wanted to, I was part of this, I wanted to change the world. Not by myself, of course, but by joining an organization to transform society in the world. When I was in high school, of course, in those days you were paying at Central High School, you pay our fees. With there was no free education then. And I can recall, I came from a middle class family. My mom was a stay-home mom, and my father was an accountant. And he sent us to private school, high school, and so. And I can recall, when you return to school, about a week after, 2 weeks, they will announce on the intercom students who did not pay their fees. So they will call out the names, and then you'll pack up your books, and then you leave, and then you'll return when your fees are paid. And I can recall there was a very brilliant young man in the class that I was in. This was somewhere, I think it was about fourth form, but second form. And he was sent home. And he returned after about a month because his parents struggled to get the fee. And I grappled with this issue, that something was radically wrong with the society that I was living in. And from then, I started to read. I came across a great philosopher by the name of Karl Marx. I'm not a Marxist, but no one can deny that Karl Marx made a great contribution to philosophy and the social sciences. Anyhow, let me put it in a nutshell. I knew that something was wrong. And later on, I came to the belief, and I subscribe to that until today, that education is a human right. It's not, it's an investment in people. It's not a commodity to be bought and sold or regulated by market forces. It should not. Just like housing. So as you pointed out earlier, there's a crisis not only in education, there's a crisis in foreign policy, there's a crisis in healthcare, in the agricultural sector, everything. And I believe that education, of course, is very important, because we have a different conception of what constitutes education. Anyhow, I got involved, I was reading and so on. And then I decided to join. I got involved in the Young Socialist movement. I barged straight into public buildings and engaged Jeffrey Thomas, who was then parliamentary secretary for youth, probably the youngest parliamentarian at that time in Parlsec. And he was the chairman of the Young Socialist movement, and he encouraged us, myself and two others, to join. We joined the YSM. And then you had Jeffrey Thomas and the others, they were moving off. And Robert Corbyn and others, a new executive were coming on. And I got onto that executive. Robert Corbyn was the chairman. We were in the central executive. We would meet at the Congress, the annex in Newmarket Street after they had the fire Congress place in Camp Street. And I was secretary for education, getting the students, young people, and so who had dropped out to go back to school and all of that. And those were the days. And I have always been socialist in orientation. I'm a socialist. I'll always be a socialist. And the ethical basis, apart from the social and economic argument, the ethical basis of my socialism is rooted in the Gospels. And it's rooted in the Quran and all the monotheistic faiths. It is there. So that's not negotiable. And so I worked, I used to write I worked with the New Nation under Dr. Reed, and so Dr. Reed sent me to sit on, I think it was one of the boards of the National Service Board, and so. And then later on, I became when Jeffrey Thomas had moved on, and he became Minister of Education. He had replaced Vincent Tico.
All right. I just don't want to, want to be rude, but I want us to keep that little gap for when we get more into the thing. Yeah. But of course, our viewers, they are getting the solid background that you are education based.
Yes.
And education is first and
Yeah.
foremost for you.
Yeah.
But you know what? We want to talk about what is happening with us.
Yeah.
Education is in crisis.
Yeah.
At 71 years old, when you look at what is happening in our schools at this time, when you look at what is happening with our teachers at this time, when you look at the non-involvement of parents at this time, what does it bring to mind? How do you feel about it?
Well, first of all, if you talk to students or you talk to teachers, you can see that something is, as I said earlier, radically wrong. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There is this tendency to confuse certification with education. What we're doing, we're signing up students for 23 CXC
29.
and 29 and all that. I think that is absolutely ridiculous. I think we're turning out all of these young people with 26 CXC and all of that. But are they properly educated? I don't think so. What we're doing is getting people certified for the job market. And then when you look at so many years after independence, okay, but the flagrant independence, and with all of these people that we're turning out, people with triple masters now at the tertiary level, and then you look at where we are, and you're not seeing that all of this training, because it's a different thing, all of this certification, is it impacting on the society? Is it in any way contributing to meaningful transformation? I'm not seeing it. Let me give you an example of something. A young lady who never left this country, who never studied outside, went to high school, primary and high school in this country, went to UG to do a first degree in public management. And she called me in the afternoon and to ask the question, who is Martin Carter? Now, whether you don't have to be an English major or doing history, whatever discipline, Martin Carter is a national hero. And our education cannot be turning out people at the tertiary level
And they don't know.
who do not know, they don't know who's Martin Carter. And there are many other names. In this country, young people, I'm a Burnhamite, and I make no apology for that. The OVP, we continue the legacy of where Burnham left off. I engage young people who do not know who's Forbes Burnham. They will tell you, oh, my aunt told me about Burnham, I heard my grandmother and so, but they don't know anything about Burnham. Good? So why I'm mentioning, apart from that, we're turning out these graduates with all of these CXC, but then when it comes to the application, you don't see it because it's just rote learning, it's cramming, and people just trying to get certified for the job market. Engage them to see what they have acquired, what they've really learned and retained, and you'll find that there are problems. And there's a certain amount of functional literacy, right? We have a serious literacy a problem of reading and writing in this country. And people think that I'm a trained literacy teacher to teach, trained to teach adults literacy and numeracy, literacy and numeracy education, and how you can embed it by teaching it in different subjects rather than separate. And I go into communities, we give people leaflets to read and all that. And then when you ask people certain things, people can't read.
They can't
and
read.
you have the age groups at 27 and all of that. So something is not right. And I think one of the problems that we're facing with, in terms of, if you're talking about resources and our human resources, the teachers and so, I think when you compare now with the days of Forbes Burnham and what Burnham was doing, Burnham was engaged in nation building. And Burnham understood that education is important in nation building. After the death of President Burnham, I think we lost the direction. I think the whole thing about nation building fell apart. I think from President Hoyt right down, it is more on economic factor, the material. Because, there is the material and the ideal. So when we talk about patriotism and nation building and all of this, these form under the ideal. But today we have a very narrow conception of what constitutes education. Good? Because education, Burnham understood and education as something holistic, right? He saw the totality of it. Education was not just going in school and get a certificate. Because I can remember he once said, when he lost it, he said, we have a lot of educated jackasses. He said that. And, I don't want to, but this society, it's sad. And there's
maybe that is why the vice president said we got a lot of stupid people in Guyana.
Well,
maybe that's why he said so. But I want to ask you, during the time of LFS Burnham, we had there the secondary schools. We had, well, of course, he made education free from nursery to university. And so what we have churning out now and people getting all excited about free university, it's just a replay of...
It was there.
It was there. So we needed to get that, that one in. But the thing is, during Burnham's time, we had the nursery schools, we had primary schools, we had our secondary schools. And alongside the secondary schools, we had the community high schools.
Yes, you had the community high school.
Now, what are your thoughts on us having having the community high schools alongside the secondary schools then, and the absence of the community high schools?
The community high schools are important. I can remember you had a former educator by the name of Pat Taylor. He had lost one of his arms. He was a very good educator. He was the principal for one of the community high schools on the East Coast. And later on, President Burnham shifted him and brought him to QC to be the principal. And of course, the old school boys didn't like that. But Burnham was sending a message. But when you look at the community high schools, where the young people, what they were learning, the vocational training and so, right? That went out. And a lot of young men passed out through those today who are well equipped with different trades and skills and so, as well as doing other subjects. And so came from the community high schools. And that just faded away. That went away. And I thought that was a mistake. The multilateral schools had technology department and they had agricultural department. Like you involved in agricultural science, but you had practical exercise. You were involved in farming and going out and, doing field exercises and so, planting and so. And in the technology department, because they had the streaming, you streamed students. You had the arts. You did a wide range of subjects from Form 1 up to 3, and then they streamed you from 4 into 4 technology, 4 agri-science and so. So from 4 agri-science, you go on to 5 agri-science or 4 arts to 5 arts. And many of those, I know some of the best plumbers the top plumbers in this country, they went to those schools, to the community high school and to the multilateral, did technology. And they learned to make things like furniture, make beds, all those things they were doing in those schools. That you had a home economics department that were training young ladies when they came out. They did home economics and all that. But all of that, I think somewhere along the line, years after, those departments like agricultural science, the practical aspect of it fell aside, and they focus more on just doing it as a theoretical subject,
Do you think that this was it was a deliberate ploy to do away with some of the ideologies of LFS Burnham?
Definitely, because you see, the nation, when you're talking about nation building, we had the young pioneers. We had the National Cadet Corps. These institutions instill a sense of patriotism. We were learning about our history. There was discipline. You did drills and so, and we had the mass games that the North Koreans helped us with. And those things, we had a sense of discipline. It existed. Look at where we are today. So yes, after President Burnham died, external forces put tremendous pressure on President Hoyt. You had the IMF and the World Bank the United States, all of these people, the Carter Center, the European, the Canadian High Commission, and all these Western embassies. And I got a problem with these countries, right? I hear people refer to them as the international community. They're not the international community. They constitute a very tiny section of humanity, but we generalize and call them the international community. And these people meddle in our affairs. And I, as a patriot, I believe in jealously and zealously guarding the sovereignty and independence of this country. President Burnham once said he don't know why these international politicians don't stay home and mind their own barnyards rather than meddling in our affairs. And I think we opened the door to that when Mr. Hoyt opened up and allowed them, we had to scale back. We had to do certain things. We had to drop all of that, as you were talking about. We had to run with neoliberal economics. We had to privatize state assets. We had to downsize the public service. We had to downsize the army. We downsized the public service. And when you downsize the public service, the people who went home were primarily Africans. When you downsized the army by 2 battalions, it was the majority of the soldiers who went home were Africans. So then when the state assets were sold off, Africans did not have the money to buy it. And ever since then, the emphasis is on economics. Now, I am not saying that their economic factors are not important to drive a nation, but when you overemphasize economic factors, when you overemphasize it, then there are other areas that will suffer. Morality will suffer, right? Love for country, patriotism, all of these values, these ideals will suffer. Because when you overemphasize the economic factor, people see it as meism, get rich, get what you can. And that's the culture that we have here today in this country.
So maybe because of some of what happened then is the reason for us having ministers in government who serve just about 5 years, and they're multi-millionaires or billionaires now, 5, 6, 8 properties, and all kinds of things, while the majority, the masses, are suffering. When we're concentrating on education, when we look at what is happening in our schools, back then in your days at school, you would remember that everybody was uncle somebody, auntie somebody. You said good morning, you said good afternoon, excuse me, please. You didn't want to scramble on the road for any adult to see you. But what is happening now?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because that is something that's part of African culture. I traveled in Africa, and you will never find a young man. If a young man goes into a shop, or so you refer to the elders, aunt or uncle. Good. And when we were growing up, we did the same. That is how we treated. We had respect for elders and so. And even the young ones, if you were going to use fancy language, language that was not nice, you would think twice. You look around to make sure there is no elderly person around before you use that type of language. Today, that is not so. You see young people on the road, students coming out of schoolyards, and they're cursing, and they don't care who's around, right? Because there's no such thing as national pride and self-pride, because listen what happened. You see, one of the things that happens is this. When certain institutions collapse, when there is no emphasis on morality, then you'll get a total breakdown across the societal institutions and everything. And that is what we're witnessing today. Now, you mentioned that during President Burnham's time, I can recall when I was in high school, before, and this is before education before they implemented free education, we were readers. There was love for books. We were reading. If you had a new book today, an interesting, like a book, in those days, the book came out like Black Power by Stokely Carmichael or something, you had a new book. You couldn't go and show a fellow student it. He will snatch the book from you and run up the road. He wanted to read it before you because there was no mobile phones and all of that, no television, but we knew more about the world than many today who have internet and mobile phones. We had an exercise we used to do, a geography exercise. I'll give you it. It was like the high school. It was fun. Sundays, you will learn capitals of various countries. And when you turn up in school Monday, you will turn to someone and say, what capital is it? And the guy will answer. You lose points with him. That was fun. Yeah? We knew in second form, you could look at the flag and tell the flag of a country. And we had no TV, no internet highway and all of that. Because the emphasis was different. Now, I am not saying that I wanted to look at education pre-Burnham, before Burnham, the PNC, when Burnham initiated this radical type of transformation, and post-Burnham. Our education system was very elitist, and since then to now, our education system, our philosophy of education, the training that our teachers are getting, because if you're going to do a postgraduate diploma in education or a BEd, you must do philosophy of education. Our education, what we're being taught, is Eurocentric. Good. The entire system is alien to us. It was imposed on us by a people who committed genocide against us, enslaved us, and indentured us. And we have not decolonized our education system. We have not decolonized it. Burnham started that thing about decolonizing. Now, I'll give you an example of something. Today, this might shock you. I met several Guyanese with doctorates in education, and they told me they have never heard of Paulo Freire.
Oh.
Paulo Freire. I can recall when Jeffrey Thomas was Minister of Education. We had the Carifest in Barbados at the time. And I was there with him as his political assistant. And he said, look, go to the bookstore, because I came back with a copy of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Press, right? Because Paulo Freire was a great philosopher of education. You can't do a degree in education, you know this, and have never read Paulo Freire. And Jeffrey said, look, I want you to go and buy 20 copies of the book. 20 copies to give to the chief education officer and people in the ministry. This was the type of policy that was being pursued under the Burnham government, to awaken teachers, educators to new dimensions in education. Like the book that Ivan Illich brought out in 1971, Deschooling Society, right? He was not saying to abolish schools. It's not about abolishing schools, but taking a different approach to schooling. And what we have is a lot of schools, we're putting up fancy structures, refurbishing schools, building schools. That is important because children need a safe and comfortable environment to learn. But we can have a lot of schooling without proper education, because education is about cultivating the human spirit, cultivating the person in a holistic way, morally, intellectually / academically, and with a sense of national consciousness.
We're going to look at a video because I'm hearing you talking about what happened then.
Yeah.
You had the elitism then. We're still having it now.
Yeah.
We're still having schools that are not equally balanced. They're not operating on a level playing field, and more so since we've made all the schools secondary school, all the community high schools, we've changed them to secondary schools.
Yeah.
And so we have lost that a big gap has been created. Because I'm sure when Burnham created the instituted the community high schools, it was to fill that gap for learners who aren't there academically.
That's right.
And so they were equipped with various skills so
That's
that they
right.
can go out there and live. But look at what we're having in our schools
Yeah.
now today. Let's just look at what's happening here.
Don't give up,
So this
Wow.
here, you're seeing where we have shifted from then to now.
Yeah.
Are we to blame the children for what is happening here? Who do we throw the blame at for what is happening here?
Well, there's a saying that the fish does rot from the head. When the leadership of a country do not set examples, and you're just interested in meism, enriching yourself, looking out for yourself. And then apart from that, it's about just using office, your relation to the state or your position in the state, whether you're a minister or what, right? To acquire wealth, to enrich yourself. There is no, then I'm getting back to the economic factor because you overemphasize this. So in the classroom, right? In the classroom, children are not being told what is right from wrong. And what's important, there must be, this is the role where we're supposed to bring in the Parent Teachers Association. Parent Teachers Association should be, parents need to work with teachers. I see they brought back in our counseling. We had counseling years ago, right? In this, every teacher was meant to be a counselor. So you had someone who was in charge of counseling, who was a trained counselor, and they would do workshops with the teachers, how to identify children with problems, right? Children coming to school late, children who might be hungry and so, and we had ways of addressing it. Like, for example, we had cases of where sometimes a child didn't come to school, and when you find out they didn't have boots, the ministry on the Bornham, they used to give you a letter and you go to Bata or places and you get shoes. I know about that. They had a special section in the ministry welfare section that used to address that. You go and you get shoes and everything. All of that went through the window. Now this here, good. A lot of the children now, when you see, if you as you said, the elitism, you have divided schools into whether you openly say it or not, it exists. Good schools and bad schools. You take certain teachers and you send them to the so-called good schools. And then you take others and you send them to the so-called bad schools, where teachers have to become like policemen and women and doing work and thing and all of that. And it's too much for them. That's right. Now, another thing which I absolutely disagree with that is happening in this country is, and I want to get back to this, is we have the CXC, for example, right? And we have schools in this country that do not offer CXC. They offer the Cambridge exam, Cambridge and London exams, and that should not be. They should not have allowed that. I think nations is one. You cannot do CXC there. Now, if I was an employer and a student is seeking a job, and you come with Cambridge certificates and the CXC, I'll hire the CXC. I'll tell you why. Because the person who did CXC, whether it's Caribbean history or you did the social studies, you are more familiar with your environment, the Caribbean environment. It's the same thing like when you're training lawyers. A Caribbean lawyer, if you're trained in law in the Caribbean, you'll understand the sociology of the Caribbean. You understand the sociology of slavery, the plantation economy, how it works, all of that, how the law was shaped. You understand? Than someone who just went to London and was trained in London, never studied Caribbean history, know nothing, and then you got to come back to work in this environment. You can never, have an understanding of the social environment and all the dynamics at work like someone who's trained in the Caribbean.
But I want...
And what we're seeing here is an absolute breakdown because it's both at the macro and micro level. Good. So I am saying that you look at it, the so-called, what they used to call common entrance, it is a weeding out. I think that exam, good, I wrote many letters about it. We need to rearrange that thing because it is too early at that age to be weeding out children. You know what is it to give a child a report showing that you didn't make it? Good. And they have to go somewhere else. And then you're talking about meritocracy and all of that nonsense. What are the chances a child leaves school and goes home? No power, no electricity in the home, right? Don't know where the next meal is coming from. The mother's a security guard, comes in late, father's absent. Is that child going to perform at the same level
as a child at QC?
As a child who went to QC, internet, and have everything? No. And this thing, it brings you back to all this talk about one Guyana. Because we brought it up flying that. I believe in one Guyana too. One Guyana is an egalitarian concept. You can't talk, I don't know what President Ali mean by one Guyana. Good? For me, when you speak about one Guyana, you're talking about transcending ethnic conflict. And for ethnic conflict to be resolved, we have to look at the structure of the concentration of wealth and redistribution of wealth.
Thank you very much.
Which is important. Good. So you can't talk about one Guyana and we live in a country with 16 families. This is a well-kept secret, where 16 families control thousands of acres of forest land, quarry land, mining blocks, and agricultural land and all of that. So what is one Guyana? I believe in one Guyana because one Guyana is an egalitarian concept, but you can never get a one Guyana in a society where there's a huge gap between the have and the have-nots and a huge imbalance, tremendous imbalance in power and wealth.
And so there lies our problem in education, where we preach this one Guyana thing.
Yeah.
But you look at what is happening, quote unquote, and we're not saying this in any disrespectful way.
Yeah.
But if you look at what is offered at Queen's College, as to what is offered to the students at Carmel Secondary, it's a vast difference. Look at what is offered to the students of St. Joseph High as against what is being offered to the students at East Rumveld Secondary, South Rumveld Secondary, Buxton Secondary. It's a vast difference. If we look at what is happening at St. Ignatius Secondary, it's not the same. And so this whole farce about universal education and one Guyana, it's just a lot of talks. We're going to look at another video. And so I want to show our viewers that when we talk about the breakdown in society, which has been caused by education, it is not isolated, it's happening everywhere. So there is definitely a problem. And we've got to get to the root of the problem so that we can fix it. While you're getting that there, yes, we have to fix the issue. Because one, it's happening too often. And when we talk about, you spoke just about the counselors, guidance we have a few guidance counselors today, but are they equipped to deal with the problems that we're having in our society that the children bring to school? Are they equipped to deal with them?
No.
When we talk about parental involvement, are we having that? No, because mommy got to go and work because daddy is absent. And even if mommy is there and daddy is there, mommy got to work, daddy got to work. So there is little supervision for our children.
Yeah.
And then the neighbor can't be looking after your child because you don't want the neighbor mind your business.
Yeah.
And we've gone to the state where we have to be so scared of asking persons to look over our children.
Yeah.
And so there again, there has been a breakdown in the whole system. And this government in particular, they seem to be finding no ways, or they just don't want to find ways to resolve the issues because they want to maintain what you just said. 16 families have this, they have that, they have that, they have the other. So they can stand above all as lords and gods. And so we will continue to have these kinds of breakdown in our system.
Yeah.
We have the video with the students fighting, another set of students fighting that we want to look at. Yes,
yeah,
go ahead.
You know, we had, as I mentioned earlier, we had the young pioneers. President Burnham had, when he had the national service, he used to print books, you know, but I think people like Barrington Braffett was involved in that. We had, you know, the primer for young children, a primer, national primer, where they learn about the flag, our heroes and all of that. Was being taught in the school, what's patriotism, discipline and all that. All of that went through, but it goes with an ideology, this neoliberal ideology, because if you look at it, right, wherever this ideology has been implemented, there's been a breakdown of morality. It creates there's a subculture of violence, meism, look out for yourself, values like community, solidarity, caring, sharing, looking out for your neighbor, all that gone through the window.
Through the door.
It's about money. And you know, education, we've reached a point now where people don't respect people with education. If you're educated and you got, that doesn't matter. If you can be ignorant and you have wealth, you're respected.
Yep.
That's the subculture that you have here. Now, I just want to show you something, because all this talk about one Guyana. My last daughter, born in Libya. So when I got back here, she went to the twice. We left Wars and then went to come back again. She went to the Islamic school and finished her CXC, and she was one of the top students, valedictorians of the school. So I took her and enrolled her at UG. She wanted to go to UG to do law, but she did 4 years sociology. She was 16. And she did 4 years sociology and got into law and finished 4 years law and performed well. Then left and go abroad. So she did a conjoint degree. She did a double major in communication and sociology and LLB law, passed the legal exams, everything to practice law. She wanted to come home here to work after graduating from the University in New Zealand and so. And she applied because her special areas, international law and human rights law. So. And she applied for a job at the ministry. This is important because we're talking about one Guyana, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Many people, including the late Elizabeth Harper, said they've never seen persons that qualified for a long time, young lady, with the experience and so. And my daughter was prepared to work for what they were offering because she wanted the experience in foreign affairs. Good. Anyhow, there was an opening somewhere else and she got a job for 4 times more what foreign affairs was offering. You know why they push my daughter around? They push her around. You know why? All because of her name. They did not employ her because her name is Pereira, and they felt that if she's employed in the ministry, maybe she'll bring things home to me, right?
Wow.
Good?
One Guyana?
Yeah.
One Guyana.
So she had to leave this country, and she's abroad working, right?
But I just want us to look at this one. And
So
then we're gonna-
that's I hope people like Minister Todd and them are listening.
well, I don't know. Sometimes they listen, but they don't hear.
Yeah.
But I just want us to look at this other one here before we continue on what we, because when we talk about indiscipline, it's not only one place,
No.
it's all around.
Yeah.
And if you look at what, if you look at what is happening, we see this kind of indisciplined behavior being exhibited in every sector.
Yep.
We just saw the Minister of Home Affairs calling on recruits to come forward with to give out their information if they've been sexually molested at the police training school. We see it happen in different workplaces. We see it happen in education. We see teachers are involved in having relationships with students and their learners, their pupils, we see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And this kind of lawlessness has got to stop. But you know what? If a minister, as has been alleged, could exploit young girls and then just have a tap on the wrist, then where do we go in terms of discipline? Let's just look at this one here.
You should.
Now here we have teachers are there.
Yeah.
Police officers are there.
Yeah.
And the students are still carrying on. As a matter of fact, today I got a report that there were students fighting at a particular school in Georgetown, in South Georgetown. A teacher went to part the fight, and the students ended up, as we would say, quote unquote, banking the teacher. The teacher got a fine licking. When in the history of this country were these kinds of things happening?
Yeah, there's an absolute breakdown. There's a breakdown in this. In this
we
society.
have seen in this country,
in all areas,
in the history of this country and maybe the Caribbean.
Yeah,
we have seen the most school fires yesterday.
Yeah,
Covent Garden was on fire. Covent Garden Secondary was on fire. And all of these schools with all of the $1 trillion budget that we're talking about, and we're still having
strange.
These
it's strange that all
in
these schools are. I've never, it's unprecedented. Schools just burning.
So many schools were burned, and then when you look at when we look at the contract, who's being offered the contract, then you sometimes could conclude,
you wonder,
well, this school had to have been burned.
Yeah,
we've seen the fire at the Mahdia Durhams, claiming 20 lives, and yet the Ministry of Education can't put system in place to ensure that the school is a safe haven for learners and their teachers.
Yeah,
are we still talking one Guyana?
You hear
before you go there, let me say to you, and it brings us back to what you started talking about when Burnham instituted the community high schools. We have some of the best plumbers and electricians coming out of those programs. Now, if we had continued that, we wouldn't have the issues here. But if I look, we're seeing here images of the Mahdia Durham. And every time we have to be reminded of this, it brings out a certain kind of anger in you. That 20 lives had to be lost senselessly because persons refused to do what was supposed to have been done.
Well, when we had the national service, good. I said we had the Cadet Corps, we had the Young Pioneers. Under President Burnham, we were inculcating discipline in the young people.
Team building
and all of that. That gone down the drain. In what we are seeing today, why I mentioned that thing about my daughter earlier before I go on is because you mentioned the vindictiveness earlier and the pettiness and all of that.
Yes.
When you look at this, with all of this, I know there's a lot of fights and so in those areas and so. Something is not right. And I don't think, those who are managing the education system have no idea about what education is about. Now, I'm not saying that to be a minister, you have to be the holder of a degree in education. I'm not saying that.
Nope, nobody's saying
but
that.
you have to be able to bring together those people, your team, and you have to lead. People like to talk about President Burnham was a dictator and all of that, and now we have democracy. If I don't know as far as I'm concerned, I can tell you, and that's an ideological issue. Democracy is a mental construct. That's what it is. Don't tell me about democracy, right? When democracy is not going every 4 or 5 years and voting, putting an X on a ballot paper and voting. Good? There are different aspects to democracy. Yep. And real democracy is when you have economic democracy. Yep. And to get economic democracy, you have to democratize the economy. This economy is a few wealthy persons and foreign companies control it. Good? When parents got to go and work, whether they're security guards, mothers, and so, good, and the NIS is some of the security companies, the big security companies in this country are the biggest criminals. They deduct the people's NIS and don't pay it. When they look at what they get and they go home, right? And then the child telling them something and they lose it with the child, they hit the child or cuss the child, right? And you get that type of thing being reproduced, right? The parent go home, they had a rough day with the boss, and that parent go home, the mother or father, and take it out. The father takes it out to the mother, and the mother takes it out to the children. It happens. And you get this culture of violence at the level. It's going on. Now, we had that, as I said, you had the counselors. In those days, the schools had counselors. And you mentioned something, that these counselors that they have, they're not trained. Because one of the problems with the training that our counselors are getting, right? And this is something different. You could go into another discussion on that. The psychology that they're being trained in is alien to our spirit and ethos. There's a whole thing called people like Dr. Wade Nobles, and so there are volumes in it that there is no such things. There might be certain things in common, but there's no such thing as a universal psychology. And so there's an African psychology, there are books on Hindu psychology and all that. The way African children learn, it has been proven. Joanza Conjufo and others have written books about this. The way African children learn, or indigenous people, is different to how maybe Europeans learn. Good? In Africa, for example, in schools, people do learning through teams. It's not about I getting the marks and running ahead of you. It was like, it's a culture of, you see, this thing about Ubuntu, the African philosophy of Ubuntu. It's an amazing thing about I am because you are, and it's about collectivity and acknowledging the humanity. This whole thing about the dunce and all that is a myth, because people can learn and be good in different skills.
At different stages.
You bring people together in a team to solve a problem, and they learn through each other. And you should see the performance, right? You pull, no one is left behind. You pull them together. So the ones who are sharp are not there to lord it over the others, but to help them. And it works. But we have this thing, this museum. I get 26 grades, I get 27, I go in for this, I get this. And that's what you do. And you create this thing of, again, this museum, this culture of selfishness. Right? And then, of course, it fosters and reinforces the elitism.
Elitism, of course.
Good.
Of course.
And the elites, you train the elites, they take over. They're the ones who can take over, become ministers, permanent secretaries, ambassadors, and the others are left behind. You either become a security guard or something else.
But as we talk more and more about this, it is clearly coming out that we've lost our way. And this government is only interested in acquiring wealth.
Yeah.
Acquiring wealth, spending the people's monies as they like, and they're not interested with what is happening in our society. And they have brought politics into education. And so nothing can go right.
Party politics. Yeah.
Party politics into education. So if you are not loyal and you can't wear the red t-shirt and a red dress and a red jacket, you're cast aside. And we have seen education officers being sidelined because they don't wear a red t-shirt or because they're not part and parcel of the PPP. Education officers have been sidelined. We've seen in schools where teachers have been marginalized simply because you are not here or because you are there. We have seen, just last week, we had coming out of Rosignol Primary School, where a parent, somebody sent me the information just now. I'm going to get the information for you. 19042 Sergeant Jaigo Paul. He's attached to Fort Wellington Police Station. He is affiliated to the PPP. He knows the chairman. It is alleged that he knows the chairman and vice chairman and all these people. So he can do no wrong in that area. His child attends Rosignol Primary. There was some mixed-up story with his child and a teacher when the matter was investigated. What was reported was found to have not been true. But you know what? They staged a play the other day where the child went to school, then the child went home, and then they made a big alarm that this child is missing. And police officers flooded that school. Could you imagine that?
Wow.
Flooded that school, terrorizing the children in school. And then that wasn't all. The parent threatened, again, it is alleged that the parent threatened a teacher with a gun.
Yeah.
And you know, the GTU will not take this matter lightly. We have to take this matter further because a policeman cannot feel because he has links here and there that he can just walk in a school and do whatever he feel like doing. At the end of the whole drama exercise, it was reported that the child is at home, and not even an apology was offered to the teachers at that school. As a matter of fact, a teacher was sent on administrative leave because it was alleged that the teacher flogged the child. When they did the investigation, it was nothing of this sort. And so politics again is playing a major role. And I want to put an alert the Minister of Home Affairs and the Commissioner of Police that the GTU will be engaging you on this issue of threat by this police sergeant. No policeman must walk into a school and threaten anybody. If you have a problem with a teacher and your child, then your place is to go to the head teacher. Not you feel that you're bad. And then we have the other issue where we talk about democracy. And here is it. The Guyana Teachers Union took industrial action, not the first time, not the second time, not the third time. And you know, the whole hypocrisy in this, in 2018, when the Guyana Teachers Union took industrial action against the APNU government, Priya Manichan then, as an opposition member, she was there supporting on her Facebook page and by telephone calls and so on, supporting the action of the Guyana Teachers Union, encouraging teachers on the Essequibo Coast and elsewhere to strike and support their union. And in 2024, when the teachers took action against her government, when she was, a whole different position was taken. Now that matter went to the court, the High Court. The Judge Kisun, ruled in that case that the government was absolutely wrong to discontinue the deduction of the Jews. We are in 2026, and the whole democracy they're talking about, and they're talking about Azzuddin Mohammed is a fugitive and all kind of thing, and they want democracy to be maintained in our society, and it would be a slap in our face if he were to be elected as the opposition leader. But here you are as government not honoring a rule of law. To date, they have not restored the deduction of the Jews to the Guyana Teachers Union. To date, they have not honored the 5 million grant that is usually given to the Guyana Teachers Union, signed in an agreement. To date, they have not honored that. To date, they have not honored the 8% that is supposed to be given to teachers and all the other benefits that were signed in that agreement. And so when we talk this One Guyana thing, it's just a fancy term that somebody pick up and they feel they can
Yeah, yeah.
use all the time.
Yeah.
But when we go back to
It's
the
empty.
schools, what is happening in the schools? Port Kaituma Primary.
Yeah.
They don't have sweepers or not enough sweepers. And so the teachers and the pupils are sweeping classrooms.
Yeah.
And it has reached a stage now where the teachers are saying we're tired of sweeping classrooms because we were not employed as sweeper
that's
cleaners.
right.
Now, with all the trillions that we are having in these budgets, what these monies went to campaign, to the elections campaign, because this is where the local government ministry comes in.
Yeah,
where are the monies to employ sweeper cleaners? Why you have teachers sweeping classrooms?
Yeah.
You know, and so it's a whole big problem that nobody really want to resolve. They don't want to resolve it because they feel that they can always trample on the rights of people.
Yeah. You see, one of the things, look, you mentioned about ministers and people enriching themselves and all of that. I can recall years ago, many of them are still alive. They accused President Burnham of this. There was a thing, you know, that Burnham was one of the wealthiest black men and all that nonsense. Burnham actually died, I don't want to use such a strong, a pauper. All Burnham left behind was a lot of books. I visited Viola Burnham at the back, you know, the back way of the Chinese embassy where she used to be there.
Where she used to live there, yeah.
And you go through the back door, she had a little Ford burner stove in the corner. And one TV staring you asleep. And a lot of books and 2 pieces of artwork on the ground, nothing. Burnham actually left nothing. Burnham brought in the Declaration of Society, where ministers had to declare their asset. And you couldn't own more than one property. One property.
As a matter of fact, let me say to you, many of those ministers
came
out of office and did not even own a property.
Listen, this is one for the nation. Someone told me that they were driving past and they saw Dr. Reed, the late Dr. Reed, former vice president and general secretary of the PNC, standing on the road waiting for transportation. So they called a former minister and said, I saw Dr. Reed, former minister on the board of time, I saw Dr. Reed waiting on transportation. The man said, you waiting? You sure it's Dr. Reed? He said, no, Dr. Reed. You know, when they checked with Dr. Reed said he didn't have the money to buy the tires for his vehicle.
Wow.
So it's up. This is a man who was a former vice president, occupied top position, and was standing on the road because his vehicle was down. He didn't have the money to buy the tires. You think the political elites who are wrong today, if they're out of office tomorrow, would experience that?
Well, if you look at what
these people have, all of them.
If you look at what Susan is having, then she can experience that. If you look at what, according to Azardine, Mustafa is having, and all the others, Priya and all the others, then they can't experience that. But this is saying to us that then the government, then that all of them bomb-based, the government then was about service to the people.
Well, you know, I believe, look, if you're interested in accumulating wealth, if you're interested in money, go into business. Go into business. But do not get involved in political activism. Do not allow the position that you enjoy in the state apparatus. Do not use that to enrich yourself. Because if you do that, as the president of the country, I have a place you. I'll make you a public example. I'll jail you. You know Julius Nyerere, who developed this whole concept about, and teachers at training college, and those who were doing the postgraduate diploma UG in education. You know what they had to read? Education for Self-Reliance by Julius Nyerere, a man that used to ride his bicycle to work. So what I'm showing you is that's what leadership is about. You don't become a minister to enrich yourself. By the time you leave office, you got a gas station, property here, property abroad, and all that nonsense. Let them name Burnham ministers that enrich themselves and got wealth all over the place. And there were all this nonsense about Burnham being the wealthiest man and all that. Yeah.
Look, we still have an outdated curriculum that we are using.
It is outdated.
And we talk so much about universal education
Yep.
and moving into the 21st century and getting this and getting that.
Yeah.
And you have an outdated curriculum.
Yes.
All we notice the Ministry of Education doing, creating jobs for the boys and the girls, their friends. They create a new arm here, a new arm there, a new arm everywhere, and you give it some fancy title, and you create jobs for the boys and the girls. Whereas you ought to now be looking at what has happened and try to fix the system, try to strengthen what you have, but they're not doing that.
No.
Modify what
The
you
place
have.
I was looking through something not too long ago, and you have this huge bureaucracy in the Ministry of Education. You have this advisor and this and all that.
Plenty.
I can recall in Queen's College compound, you know, they had a division called Test Development Unit. They still have that?
Well, they have the exams division now.
Well, you always had the exams division, but there was a unit called Test Development, and we had curriculum development.
Well, they claim to be doing that at NSERD.
Yeah.
In Kingston.
Well, let me tell you something about the NSERD thing, because Mr. Norton is aware of this. We assisted in the drafting of Train the Trainer manual. And when we checked NSERD to see what they had, what they were in possession of, right? The material, the literacy material. You know what NSERD had? You're not going to believe it. Patty the milkmaid.
Ouch.
Patty the milkmaid. Now, how could you tell a child from Buxton, Moko, or Annandale, Patty the milkmaid? That is what NSERD had. I'm serious. And I don't want to mention, I think the lady who, I don't know if she's still there. What's her name? It will come to me, but she was in charge of NSERD at the time. That is what we had. And then you had another set of materials that were prepared by, I think, nations. Basic literacy thing. All Eurocentric. Now, how could you take, because education, the education system, right, reflects a given culture. It is part of your culture. Good. Your culture, I mean, shapes the education system. The education system also is a dialectical thing working it. You can't teach literacy to African, Indian, and indigenous children by using manuals that were prepared that is culturally insensitive and not culturally appropriate and culturally relevant. And that is what NSERD had. So something is not right.
Well, let me tell you what. We have all of these textbooks that are being printed.
Yes.
Billions and hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent
on textbooks.
On textbooks, and many of them got incorrect information inside. They had to pull a whole set off of the shelf. And it's all because we give them to friends and family who they themselves don't know how to read. They don't know, they don't have any the skills in proofreading and so on, or maybe they don't even want to pay proofreaders. So they print, and then they had to go and reprint all of these textbooks again. The Guyana, our country, our home, a whole lot of incorrect information they had in that book.
Somebody was telling me about.
And so it is saying to us that education is in crisis. Could you imagine we are taking just about anybody and putting them in serious in senior positions? We have what is happening in our system now. We're taking junior teachers from out of the classrooms, and we're seconding them to the departments of education, and they're going out visiting schools. They don't know, and they're going out to supervise schools. And so here is where we're having the whole lapse in the system. When we look at what is happening in Common Entrance, like you mentioned, which is a National Grade 6 assessment, we're having every year 15,000, 14,000 plus writing that. And when we're churning out of the secondary school, you're barely having 8,000 or 9,000.
Something is not right.
Something is not right. But nobody is looking after. When we have the grade 6, everybody talks about the 1%, this 100. What happened to the rest? Nobody looking after
No.
them, but we make big noise about this.
Yeah, how much money you spend.
The
It's
same
about-
thing with CSEC.
Yeah.
We made big noise about those who got 29 and
so-
those
yeah.
who get 19 and 21 and all of that. What happened to those who got 5?
That's right.
What happened to those who have
Yeah.
7?
Yeah.
What happened to those who got 3
Yeah.
subjects?
Yeah.
Nobody looking at
Yeah.
them.
No.
So
But
again,
you're happy to say that, look, the
Guyana
one who
top the
get
Caribbean
you
again.
top, yeah.
we top
Yeah.
the Caribbean
Yeah,
again.
it's
But
absolutely
the 3 and
yeah.
the 5 subjects, they fall
Go-
by the
yeah.
wayside.
Yeah.
And what? They can't get a job. You don't have anything else in place for them. And so the cycle
keeps
going
rolling
and
going
rolling
on
and rolling all the time. And yet we want to preach one Guyana.
Guyana.
And so when we talk about education is in crisis,
Yeah.
it's not that we want to crucify and
Yeah.
we want to condemn, but
Yeah.
we want to help what is happening.
Yep.
And here is where this government feels that they don't want help from anybody.
Yeah.
They don't know, but they don't want help from the people who know. And so we will continue to have many more of our students fighting on the road. We're going to continue to have many more of our students exhibiting vulgar and inappropriate behaviors when we have school parties and so on. We're going to have many more of our children, like the 13-year-old we saw just the other day, attempting to rob 2 pensioners. We're going to have many more of that because the system is failing them.
Yeah.
The system is completely failing all of our people.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to that mother, she said, I complained several times. I went to the agencies. I went to them. I complained. Just the other day, we had a young lady who jumped to her death. Lots and lots of calls were made, complaints. And you know what? They make somebody the sacrificial lamb when these things happen. So 2 or 3 nurses at the Georgetown Hospital are going to be made the sacrificial lamb for this young lady jumping to her death. When the hospital did not have enough staff and we have individual rooms where patients are in, are you saying that you have a nurse or 2 stationed in a room? It's 4 or 5 nurses you have to man.
That is negligence. What happened there should never happen.
And so again, the system continue to fail our people.
That's right. It's systemic.
And they're not taking ownership for it.
No.
They're not taking ownership for it. The Minister of Health should have been gone a long time.
Yeah.
Just the other day, we saw a newborn baby born. They said the baby is dead. On the way to bury this newborn baby, the baby started breathing again. By the time the parents rushed the baby, they put the baby in the incubator and started giving the baby oxygen and all kind of thing.
Yeah.
A while after, the baby was pronounced dead again. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing with our systems? We have a teachers training college that is filled with politics, decorated with politics all over. So you got to be connected to be a director and to be this and to be that. So the director gives orders to the principal and all kinds of craziness. And you have teachers graduating without even completing the program.
Yeah.
And we make a big noise. Highest number of graduates from the teachers training college. We have done this, we have done that. We've seen it in the schools that they're building. You're building huge schools.
Yeah.
But do we build the schools with all the necessary facilities to ensure that our children are rounded when they leave schools?
You know, the earlier you mentioned about we were talking about the material, this emphasis on the economic aspect. This government is taken up with this thing about big, for them, they have a very lopsided conception of what constitutes development, big buildings, more hotels and all of that. Development must, apart from being sustainable development, it has to be people-centered. At the end of the day, it's about people. And if development doesn't serve the masses, the people, then it is not authentic development, right? That will only benefit this so-called developmental section. And if you overemphasize the economic, like they're doing, everything is economic, spend money here, do this here, and that's the thing. What about the other sections? What about moral development? What about spiritual development? Because you see, I'm going back as someone who's Afrocentric. The African understanding of education is you have to understand the human person, to be more than being human being, the person in totality, right? They're not just economic being slash biological being and physical being. They're social beings and they're spiritual beings. Education, and this might be too hard for them, is about the cultivation of the spirit of the human soul. So you have to bring different sectors of the society into this process of molding young minds in moral and spiritual development, as well as the academic and the intellectual. The role for the church is there, the mosque, the man there, all of these. The ministry has to work from it. It's not just about writing religious studies at CXC, right? They must have an integrated approach, and the role of the parent teachers, right? The role of parent teachers association, the religious bodies, and all of these bodies, the ministry, the teachers union, and everybody have to work together. It was being done during burnout time. You remember they had a teachers union had an excellent general secretary. I remember, a marvelous person, Jean Porsico.
Jean Porsico, yes.
These were people who had vision. You know, all of that is past, gone down the drain, because those who are managing the education system today do not understand what education is about. They confuse. I always tell the young ones, do not confuse education, certification with education. They are two different things. I can give it, and I tell them so as to let them build their self-esteem, let them understand things. I tell them, Hubert Nathaniel Cruchillo never went to high school. He didn't have a degree, right? The great C.L.R. James, one of the finest minds the third world of the world produced, was never the holder. He got honorary doctorates, was never the holder of a university degree. George Lamin, we can go on. Marcus Garvey, many. But look at the works these people have, right? Because they were educated, not necessarily certified. So we are turning out all these people, right?
With certification.
With certificates, but are not properly educated. And you can see that because you're not seeing the impact on the society. Look, after so many years of flag and anthem independence and Republican status, we still have white Canadians coming in this country to lecture our magistrates and judges. It's pathetic. Do you know that here? Do you know, I've traveled and I've been to countries. Do you know some of the, and this is part of smashing this Eurocentric myth and all this Ivy League thing. Do you know some of the best universities? Well, now the Chinese have overtaken the Chinese university. Do you know some of the best universities on this planet are located in Africa?
Well, some of us might not know.
Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria is one. The University of Ibadan. When we were growing up, you know what was our dream? To get a scholarship to go to Ibadan. There was a Guyanese woman who graduated and went on to Ibadan, the force, to get a master's. Janet Gibson, and went on to earn a doctorate. People, look, Nigerians, what Nigerian universities like Ahmadu Bello and Ibadan teach you in the first year, that it will take you second year in Western universities. But yet, we look up, oh, you went to Oxford, you went to here. And it's all part of this colonial myth, right? And it is time for it to be smashed, because a lot of people who were trained in those institutions, and you look at what they're doing, it's not impacting on the society. You know, it's not. And I think now people are encouraging, especially this nonsense that Trump is doing, making it difficult. People are encouraging students of this part of the world to go to African universities and Asian universities and study, right? So why I mention that to you is because at the end of the day, in this country, they do not understand, one, what constitutes development. They don't understand what sovereignty, and they have a very narrow, very parochial conception of what education is all about, right? To educate a nation, you need educators. And educating, as Paulo Freire said, is not the teacher acting. You know, the banking system, the student is just there, a blank slate. and this depositing theory, just depositing into the head. No, we have to, as I mentioned, the African, that tradition, that collective learning. We have to take a new approach, new approach in the school. You cannot alienate children at that age. If you do, you will get that sense of loss, hopelessness, and you will get what you're seeing in the streets.
Which is happening in our
Which
society.
is happening.
Which is happening in our society. Look, folks, we would want to go on and on and on and on. I'm seeing a viewer here talking about Mackenzie High School telling the children to go and sit in a corner because there weren't any chairs. Wow. They don't have chairs for them to sit on. Wow. A teacher, somebody's child is in Form 3. And her mother already provided 2 sets of chairs. Wow. And
but we're talking about digital economy and Silicon City.
Look, story. And so, I'm happy when we can have these things, butchering of the English language by those in high positions. Well, if we had a minister who did not know her part of speech, we got this present minister who talk about, I will try my utmost best. And so when you hear these people speak like that, we got a president who can't pronounce words. And when you hear people speak like that in high positions, then will you expect the poor child who come from, let's say, Tiger Bay, maybe all they know that they have to do is to go into Tiger Bay and cook up rice, and they go somewhere else and they cook up rice and somewhere else and cook up rice. That's the generational wealth that you're encouraging. But folks, we can go on, but we have other things to do, and other persons would want to be on having their programs too. Mr. Pereira, it was such a pleasure having you. We have to do this again.
Thanks.
And because our people must know where we came from and where we have lost sight of what we would have acquired then. No wonder our society and our country at large is in the state that it's in. Viewers, we want to thank you for watching us here tonight on Advancing the Cause. I want to caution you, be careful on the roadways. We're having too many accidents, too many senseless accidents. And then we're having all kinds of execution-style murders. Look, if we return to the days of when teaching was teaching and community was family, we wouldn't have all that we are having in this society. But the government of the day is teaching us to live and to fight against each other. Let's remember, we are one people, one nation, one destiny. Not this one Guyana thing, because it's not working for us. Budget day is on Monday. The opposition leader is going to be sworn in on Monday. And so let's wait to see what happens there. And we're going to continue. But for now, you be good Guyanese citizens. Those of you watching us right here, and those of you watching us in the diaspora, good night to you, and may God continue to bless you. Thank you for being here with us.